All right, we're back for another Biz Builder show, and we've got a cool business here, one that I like to frequent as much as possible. Um, Mainly it's because it's got some great food and a great time, so you can't really go wrong. But I've got Annalise Andrews with me. She is the founder and CEO of Key West Food Tours. So there's two great things in that title, Key West and food. So thanks for joining me, Annalise. Appreciate it.
Thank you for having me. I'm excited.
Yeah. Well, I always like to kind of give, listeners kind of a little bit of background on yourself. So kind of walk us through, where you're from, where you went to school and kind of your career up until starting Key West Food Tours.
Sure. Yeah, I'm from Key West. I was raised here. My mom was raised here, and her parents came over from Cuba in the 1950s. So just love the Florida Keys. It's in my blood. Um, Grew up here, went to Key West High School. Then I went to Florida State, which is like the furthest I could get away from Key West, but still get that in-state, tuition. Um, I studied psychology in Florida State, just kind of had a fun college experience, nothing too crazy. When I came back to Key West, I was just, my brother actually had this kind of like upscale pet boutique that I worked at. So he was something, he started this business of selling like kind of, definitely like toys and clothing for dogs, smaller
Okay.
dogs. It's a big market. And yeah, I come from a entrepreneurial background as far as my family goes. My mom had her own market research company for over 30 years, basically in the Hispanic market. And even, my older brother, just growing up with him, I mean, he would sell baseball cards, anything he could try and flip, he would. So obviously just, being in that environment definitely prepared me for opening a business, but it wasn't on my radar to open a business. Like I never grew up thinking like I'm going to start a business or I'm going to run a business. But basically the pet boutique didn't work out, but it was fun, during the years that it was here. But after that, I just was waitressing. And the reason was because I was just like fresh out of college. And all I really cared about was going traveling. I just wanted to do like a backpacking trip or something. So I would work as a waitress here in the morning, 7 a.m. shift, all the way to 11 p.m. I worked at two different restaurants, and I was just like stacking all of my tips away so I can go travel. And then I did end up traveling. I was supposed to go on like a 6-month European backpacking trip with my boyfriend at the time, and then we broke up. And then I was supposed to go with one of my girlfriends, and that didn't work out. And my mom was like, why don't you just go by yourself? And I was like, what? Like go by myself to Europe? Like I don't know anybody, and what am I gonna do? And so I started searching like solo female travel, and finally got enough courage to do it. I ended up going for 6 months to Europe
Wow.
by myself. And I ended up meeting so many people. It like changed my life. I had just so much confidence after that trip of doing that by myself. And I went on a lot of free walking tours out there. So it's like, you just tipped the guide, but they took you on this like walking tour of the city. And I came back to Key West, and things kind of started turning in my head. And I was just talking to my mom and being like, I want to do something like that here in Key West. At first, I wanted to open a hostel because I was like, oh, I went to all these cool hostels in Europe, and I can, that's like way out of my budget to start that business. But I was like thinking about doing a walking tour, and I also started to research, and like in Europe, I never took, I was on a backpacker budget. I never took like actual, real tours in Europe. But what's really popular, especially in Italy, is it's called Cooking with Nonna, where you like cook with the Italian grandmother, and it's like a cooking class. And I thought, man, that would be really cool to do in Key West with my grandmother. My grandmother's from Cuba, and she is definitely the matriarch of the family, and she cooks all the time. And so I was like, wouldn't that be so cool if we got to go into her house and have cooking classes with her, and she could teach people how to make certain dishes and make mojitos and all this stuff. And I was just like, this is a fabulous idea. And my grandmother, first of all, it's like, I'm going to use my 87-year-old grandmother for profit and gain.
Hey, come on.
Yeah. I know that after probably one thing that we did, she'd be like, oh, I don't want to do this anymore. And I'd be like, oh, well, we have 10 people booked at 11 a.m. We're all coming into your house. But it actually turned out with the city. This is like the main, crushing defeat of this idea, was that the city of Key West was like, no, you have to have a, health certificate for a restaurant. Like, you can't go into a house, like, da, 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 da. So they kept saying, like, restaurant, restaurant, restaurant. And because they kept telling me about restaurants and the health code in the kitchen, I just, like, my brain pivoted to restaurants. And so I was like, okay, well, what if I'm trying to recreate this idea that before the city shut me down, I was like, well, maybe not my grandmother, but maybe other grandmothers in Key West, because, like, I have to diversify with the grandmothers. But anyways, the city shut me down and I pivoted to restaurants.
How long were you doing the classes like that?
Oh, no, it never even.
Okay,
Gotcha. Because the city was just like, no, you can't get a business license.
Government.
Right. Yeah. So then I kept thinking, okay, well, what if I recreate this idea that I was going to do in my grandmother's kitchen, which is Cuban food, key lime pie, conch fritters. It's that first tour that you went on that I basically recreated to restaurants. And me and my mom, were like, wow, we came up with such a good idea. And then I Googled it and I was like, oh, it's called a food tour. Like, I'm not the first person to think of this idea. And come to find out, there's food tours all over the world. And I was like, whoa. And so, me and my mom were like, okay, then we can, now there's a playbook, like, for what the business looks like. And my name, Key West Food Tours, I mean, now, obviously years later, I'm like, oh, I wish I had some sort of, like, brand name that's not so descriptive, because it's very generic for my company. But back then, when I launched my website, 2 days later, I started selling tickets without nobody knowing who I was. And I was like, oh, this is how you start a business. And my mom's like, no, something's wrong. Like, how do people know about you? You just went live on your website 2 days ago. Hadn't told a single soul about it. It's because people were typing Key West Food Tour into Google. Yeah. And I was popping up. And then these people that were immediately booking on the first week of my business were like, oh yeah, I took a food tour up in Atlanta, Georgia, and now I go on food tours. And so just that alone, Google typing in those search words, and there was my company popping up. It was just incredible.
Yeah. So how long was the process for you? Like, how long were you kind of going after the other business model that didn't pan out? Was that, over months?
That whole beginning to end was about 6 months.
Okay.
Yeah. So not too long.
That is definitely a roller coaster though, too, emotionally, because it's like, you have in your mind, like, this business model and, this way. But I think, like a lot of successful entrepreneurs, you always have to be, aware and willing to pivot when you need to. And I think, I want to say I went on your food tour probably for the first time in 2015 or 16, early 16, if it wasn't 15. And for me, it's like my wife and I love to go to Key West. It's probably our favorite spot. It's a nice little drive from Central Florida. And I am so picky about food. I am, like, my wife calls me boring when it comes to food. Like, I'll try something different, dude. Yeah. And so I was like, you know what, we're going to Key West. And she found your website, and she's like, would you try this? And I looked at the places and I was like, dang, man, I don't know if I can eat all this stuff. Yeah. but I was like, you know what? I'll try. I'll try it. And we had a blast. Number one is we met some cool people, you know, that were in our group. Your tour guide was awesome. And the food was good.
Yeah.
And it was like a good variety of stuff. And, you know, when you go to Key West or a lot of these vacation areas, you know, you're kind of like herded into, you know, like the commercialized area that they want you. And this tour kind of took us outside of, you know, Duval Street, you know, which is the main street in Key West. So it kind of let us find some cool little local spots. And we love it. So every time we go to Key West, we do a food tour. And it's either we did the original one, we did the seafood one, and we've done the most recent one, and we love it. And we would do it if you kept it the exact same every time. So so you kind of had, you know, you talked about like you put the website up, you start getting, you know, bookings. Was it pretty steady from then on? Like, did it just kind of like pop and it happened, or did you have some peaks and valleys there and, you know, some stumbling blocks?
Yeah, I mean, I think yes and no. I would definitely say it's been 6 years now, and it's been like slow and steady all the way up, because the customers that are coming on typically to market to them. So the ones that are coming on, and initially were coming on, which were the people that are like, I went on a food tour in Atlanta, I went on a food tour in LA, I went to, you know, Rome and took a food tour. And so now they're exposed to that model and they look for it when they travel. But to explain the concept to a person that doesn't know what a food tour is, so it's like, oh, I do food tours. I'm like, what is a food tour? Okay, well, it's a walking tour. And I, you know, in the beginning, I would just describe it as, it's a, you know, pub crawl, you know, bar crawl, you go to a bunch of different bars, taking you to restaurants, and you're eating just a little bit of food, and it makes up, you know, a lunch. So that's a lot harder to, like, especially in marketing, to convey that message. You have to explain and educate the customer on what this product is. And of course, everyone's like, oh, that's really cool, because everybody eats.
Right.
You know, the customer is everybody, like everyone's eating. Everyone has to eat. And so that probably was the most challenging part, is how to expose the idea to new people. So the first couple years were like really only people that had explicitly wanted to go on a food tour because they'd heard about it or someone told them about it. Now, because we're so highly rated on TripAdvisor, we're just getting people that are like, this is a top activity to do. I don't know what this is, but it you know, is rated really well, and it's one of the things that you now have to do. So we're getting a different kind of customer who might not, I mean, I'm assuming your wife loves trying new foods, because that's how she got you on this. Yeah. So, but now we're seeing, you know, couples or families that are not necessarily foodies coming on the tour just because it's highly rated and it's, you know, a top attraction. So that's now a, you know, an interesting shift. But yeah, I would say it's been steady. I mean, last year was our biggest year, and we were really going into corporate. So, you know, Key West is a big conference, incentive sales, you know, treating your top sales to a trip to Key West. So we were doing a lot of corporate events last year, which is nice, because these were, you know, we still have small groups. It's usually 8 to 10 people, 12 people that we take on these experiences. But shifting to the corporate side last year was just like this, you know, now you have 150 people. And so how do you create a food experience for them? And like you said, you're getting a chance to experience the culture and the town in a different way. A lot of people come down here, they're on Duval Street, they never get off Duval Street, and that's a shame. You know, it's like going to New Orleans and staying on Bourbon Street the whole time. There's, you know, you miss so much of the city, and it's so special for us that we get to show people a local different side, like that Cuban restaurant you went to. I grew up eating there. My mom used to wait tables there in the 60s, the 1960s. She grew up down the street from that restaurant. It's like, it's a cultural staple in Key West. And I would feel, bad if someone came to Key West and they didn't experience that, So
that's the great thing about it. I mean, because again, I stay typically on Duval Street at the
which is fun.
La Concha, and I do that so I don't have to drive anywhere.
Totally.
But I mean, we walked there, we walked all around, but it's definitely off the beaten path for that. And so I think it also helps those businesses because I know that we've gone back and eaten at places that were on the food tour we would have never went to without the food tour. So
that was hard too, explaining to all the restaurants the concept. They're like, what? You're going to come in here for 10 minutes and you're going to get, a quarter of a portion that we would normally sell you know what I mean? It was just like, yeah, but they're going to come back. They're going to come back and eat dinner. So you're getting the customer twice and I'm going to pay you for it.
Right.
Now we have restaurants reaching out to us saying, can we your food tour? Yeah.
I mean, it's great. It's a great way to market for, a restaurant. When you were kind of like formulating the idea, did you talk to any other food tours throughout the country, or are food tour owners ultra competitive, or are they helpful?
Very helpful. And the reason is because if someone goes on another food tour in another city anywhere in the world, it's going to benefit me, because if they're ever in Key West, they're going to look up my company. So when I was first pivoting that idea, me and my mom on Google came across this kind of it was called Food Tour Pros, which is kind of like a crash course. It was like a 2-day crash course learning from Chicago Food Planet, which is tours in Chicago. And he had been doing food tours for 10 years. So he was basically selling you a 2-day course on everything you should do on, as far as food tour goes. So I flew to Chicago and I took this 2-day crash course for food tours. And everyone was like, what? You're doing what? And I'm like, but don't reinvent the wheel. Look at these food tours all over the world that are successful. And doing that class, it cut out 3 years of trial and error experience.
I mean, that is the hardest part sometimes in starting a business, is that learning curve, because it doesn't really matter what the industry is or what it is.
Yeah.
There is a learning curve. And if you have the time and the money to avoid that, it's definitely worthwhile.
Yeah.
I know there's a food tour close to probably a couple here.
I took one in Orlando. It's called Around Orlando Tours.
Okay.
It was great. We did it in Winter Park.
Yeah. I saw Winter Park, and there was, I don't know if there still is, but there was one in Winter Garden as well, which is a little west of Orlando. But no, I mean, I think it's a great thing. And every time I talk to somebody about Key West, I bring up the food tour, because it is just, like I said, it's out of my comfort zone, and it's been really cool. So as you're developing this, what kind of has, changed, from the early part? What did you see? And, did you have to pivot more? And how have you continued to develop it?
Yeah. So, just, year by year, I started off just me, being the tour guide, and I was just the tour guide for about 2 years. Then I brought my first person on, and now, before COVID, we were a team of 8. I had a general manager that was about to hire an operations manager. I mean, that's how big it was getting, because I told you about the corporate side and private tours that we were doing last year. We had even created a tour, which is on pause right now, but eventually we'll bring it back, called the Hemingway Experience. And it was specifically designed for corporate groups, because they're coming to Key West for a couple days and they're in meetings, all day. what is the one thing that they probably want to see while they're in Key West is the Hemingway Museum. It's the #1 attraction on the island. So because it's the #1 attraction in Key West, I wanted to develop a food tour. I'm like, well, Key West Food Tour should be bringing you to the Hemingway House. So it's called the Hemingway Experience. You have a guided tour of the Hemingway House. Then we go to 3 food and drink places that Hemingway frequented and kind of traveled through his footsteps with food and drink. But it was designed for large groups. So we could do like 20, 25, 30 people at a time. So it was, you know, and this is for, you know, the whole team to, you know, kind of like a team building experience too. Mm-hmm. Obviously COVID has completely changed everything. So the corporate side of conferences, I think corporate travel will take a while to go back to what it used to be. But yeah, I would say, you know, we lost some tour guides. Some just had to leave Key West. They, you know, couldn't afford rent here during that 2-month shutdown. And we actually had to, one of our restaurants, a partner that we've been working with since, you know, I first started that Southernmost food tour, that original tour, closed and moved locations. So we actually had to shut down the Southernmost food tour. We're hoping to reopen it. So then the seafood tour that you went on, we actually changed that around so we can get it to be not so seafood focused and get more people on it, and changed it to the historic seaport. So it's just like day to night, just completely rebranding and pivoting and just trying to make it work, which it is, but it's, you know, we're still in a pandemic, and restaurants and bars are not considered the, you know, most safest place to be right now. So the good thing about that tour, the historic seaport tour that like you just recently went on, is that it's pretty much all outdoors, which is great. Key West has a lot of alfresco dining, which is good. But yeah, the COVID problem, it's been a little.
It's definitely hurting a lot of businesses, and I know that, you know, your tour guide was really good about, you know, safety and you know, social distancing while we were together, and my group had 7 in it, so you know, really it was three groups, so it was nice. We felt comfortable, we felt safe in it, so but yeah, being outside too definitely helps. When you said you were starting to get like a lot of corporate, so like how did you get that? Was that all just them finding you, or did you start like kind of targeting certain companies, and how did you even know who to target?
I went on LinkedIn.
LinkedIn's great.
I love LinkedIn. I went on LinkedIn and made like a master spreadsheet of, okay, so when I first started marketing, especially like here in Key West, I would go, I have a running list of all the hotels and B&Bs, and I'd go in and talk to the concierge. You know, the concierge, it's like, it's nice having these relationships with them, but you know, they're usually they want to be selling boat trips and things that they can get like the biggest
big money
return on their commission. My little walking food tour was such small groups, it's not going to give them a huge commission. So then when I started, you know, networking and going to these events and talking to people, we had someone from the Casa Marina, Waldorf Astoria, he came on our tour, and he was the corporate group sales booking for Casa Marina. So once I realized that, I was like, okay, well, we should start focusing on targeting all of the you know, salespeople at these hotels that are booking these people, groups to come. That's where the money's at, is the numbers. So yeah, I went on LinkedIn and just cold messaging all of these people, and like one property, you know, you realize then you're really narrowing it down to like the 3 to 4 properties in Key West that are doing the most corporate sales, and really just focusing your attention on them. And Yeah, I mean, I would cold message, and when you're starting to like cold message every single person in all different departments in the hotel, and they're like, "Ooh, the food tour," and then you just get one person to come on the tour, and they're like, "That was really cool."
Yeah.
But then we started, doing sales presentations. We bring everyone a little key lime pie and tell them, basically, this is great for your clients because, Key West, we have we did, I don't know what the number is now, but we had pre-COVID around 330 restaurants on the island, and the island is only 2 by 4 miles. It's really small. It's a lot of food. And the cool thing about a food tour is you're going to like 5 to 6 restaurants in a 3-hour span. So you get to test out a lot of these restaurants. But I kept trying to fit my little group, small group tours into the mold of the corporate groups. And like when I finally was just like, no, stop. Like I need to listen to them. Like, what do you need? And I will provide what you need, instead of like the reverse, trying to fit them into my mold. It wasn't working because we have tiny groups. That Cuban restaurant, you can't, there's right. Just these mom and pops, you can't be like putting all these people in. And that's when I just shut up and I was like, no, I'm going to listen to them and what do they need? And that's when the Hemingway experience came out of that, because it's like people want to go to that museum and they have very limited time. So let me give you lunch while you also go to that museum.
Yeah, no, it's good because it's a totally different market too than what you were going after. So right. I mean, it's a good way to scale up and build up. Did you like invite most of the people to do the tour, from the hotels?
Yes, I would. We would say, call us up and we'll put you on a tour. Like, we just need you to experience it. But even then, it's hard to get locals out on the tours, mainly because of the weather. Like locals are just not going to be walking around outside during the day. It's just, you're not going to find like locals doing that. So that, it's always a challenge getting locals on the tour. And I think too, is that they see the restaurants and they're like, oh, El Cibonet, the Cuban restaurant. They're like, I go there like with my family on a Friday night. Like, why do I need you to take me there?
Right.
But they don't realize all the history they're going to learn about the food, which is even more special when you're from here and you like learn about the history of Cuban food. We're only 90 miles away from Cuba. And you're like, whoa, I get, you just get to connect to the food in a more special way. And that's why I encourage people to like take food tours every time they travel, because it's such a memory, you're really hitting all the senses, and especially taste. I mean, like when you went to Italy, like you remember the food when you went over there. I want people to try the key lime pie here and just be like, I'll remember that forever.
Yeah. No, it's definitely, it's something we've talked about doing, in other cities too, just because, it is one of our most fun activities in Key West. We like that. And we like to do the sunset, like sip and sail cruise. Yeah. So those are our two things. It's like every time we do the same thing, but we enjoy it. So tell me what are the tours that you have now, because maybe are going to be coming back soon, but I know you have a few. I haven't done the drinking one, but kind of go over what tours you have.
Right. So right now we're running the historic seaport, and that's along the seaport of the island. It is still seafood focused because it was the seafood lovers tour, but we have a lot more options for people that don't necessarily eat seafood. And
I liked not to cut you off there, but I liked in that tour too. It was a little different because we stopped at the cigar shop to see them kind of actually like, how they make cigars and the history of cigars in the area.
That's like that's a cultural stop. And I love putting those kind of cultural stops on the food tour because, like that cigar shop and the sandal factory that's right next door. Those are businesses that my mom used to go into when she was a little girl. Like, so they've been here for so long, and you feel like you step back into old Key West when you walk in them. So yeah, it's that I love that part of the tour, is that you get to experience a cultural side to the island. But yeah, so the historic seaport, and then we just reopened our cocktail tour a couple weeks ago. And
what is that? Because I've never done that one.
Yeah, so we have like a ton of pub crawls here in Key West.
Right.
And you can go on a pub crawl. You'll go to Sloppy Joe's and Rick's and Fat Tuesdays. It's like all of those typical bars on Duval Street. So of course, I wanted to create a tour to the places that I want to go to and like to go to, because as a local, like, locals don't go to Sloppy Joe's, locals don't go to Irish Kevin's. It's just It's the truth, you know? Yeah. So they're designed for tourists. So we walk down Duval Street, but then you pop out into all these little side streets, a block off Duval, that have these bars that you'll find real locals at. And so this is to differentiate from the pub crawl. This is a craft cocktail experience. So it's a little bit more elevated than a normal, like 2-for-1, kind of well-drink pub crawl that you'll find in Key West. So these are craft cocktails, and yeah, we go to 5 different places, and it's a really special tour. We have a little bit of food on it, but it's more focused on the drinks.
Is that an evening tour, or is that
it's from
afternoon
3:30
as well?
p.m. to 6:30. So it's like that perfect
right before dinner. Yeah.
Yeah. And all of the drinks, you kind of get to choose which cocktails you want, except for one stop that we go to. We serve a Hemingway daiquiri, which is not frozen. It's how it's supposed to be, but that's how Hemingway, what Hemingway drank when he was down here. So we feel like it's kind of like a historical drink to put on. But that tour is a completely separate market than the food tours. So when we first launched the cocktail tour, it was 2 years ago. When the people come on the tour, our first question when we, do the introduction, usually we check people in, is, how did you hear about this? And then we're like, we're Key West food tours. We do food tours. And they're like, what's a food tour? Like, they had no idea what we did for our main source of tours, which is around food. These were people that were searching out pub crawls and wanting to do something a little different in Key West. So completely different market than the food tours. Whereas the 2 food tours, the Southernmost, that's the one that's on pause right now, but that's the original tour that I created, which is kind of like the basic welcome to Key West. I mean, you get Cuban food, key lime pie, conch fritters, fish tacos.
Like everything, yeah.
Yeah, it's like the bucket list of Key West. And then the historic seaport, because they're in 2 separate neighborhoods, people will take, both. One year they'll come down like you did, and a few years later they'll come down and take the other one. But with the cocktail tour, you usually don't find the people that are like, I mean, once they come on the tour, but it's not someone who took our food tours and then went on it's so interesting. It's just a different market.
That's crazy.
But it's a lot of fun. So if you ever want to come on it, it's a good time.
So when did you get opened back up from COVID? Is there still any restrictions for you, or are things pretty much full swing 7 days a week?
Yeah, so we reopened June 8th. So June 1st is when Key West reopened. We wanted to give the restaurants just a week of reopening before we started bringing our tours in there, just to kind of feel it out. And unfortunately, I lost half of my guide team. Some people left Key West. Then some people weren't comfortable guiding tours, which is perfectly fine. So we actually had to train new guides. So it wasn't until September that we were actually open 7 days a week. And then, of course, with the Southernmost food tour, we started it up, and then a restaurant shut down, and another restaurant changed their operations. We had to close that tore down. So it was a lot of like squeaky wheel. But September 1st, we've been open now 7 days a week. And September, we did 75% of our sales that we did last September.
Wow.
Yeah.
That's awesome.
So people are still wanting to do this. And I feel like this is kind of an echo for the tourism, sector in general, is that the demand is not going away. It's just, the restrictions and the safety, of course. But yeah, we're on a path, back. The corporate, I think it's just going to have to pause for a couple of years. I don't see that coming back anytime. I think it's a little bit of a liability for a company to send, their employees on travel. But yeah, Key West is at 100% capacity now for the restaurants, per the governor's orders last week. But a lot of businesses are still choosing to run half capacity. And September is in Key West, September is our slowest month of the year. So, and I know you came down last weekend, you said it was a little busy, because I think people just been pent up. So even though it's traditionally slow, it's like, no, I still want to take a vacation. And I think that, Key West, what I was telling you before, the Florida Keys are in a really good place for a rebound because you can drive here and it's a nice idyllic escape. I actually, in the whole span of this food tour realm, 2 years ago, I became the CEO of True Bahamian Food Tours in Nassau, Bahamas. And that ended up coming through a food tour network. And I now have a business partner with the girl, who started it in Nassau. But Nassau and the Bahamas have been shut down since March. And there's no light, at this tunnel where it's, they might reopen next month, but the cruises were such a big part of their industry. Yeah.
Do you capitalize on the cruises that come into Key West for the Key West food tour, or how does the timing work on that?
Yeah, so we had a partnership. We got a partnership with Holland last year, which was great because that was something too that I was, trying to cold message and email representatives, trying to talk to the other tours here to see how I can contact these people. And the reason why, I went after Holland is because Holland is a more of an upscale clientele. And, our food tour tickets are $75. So when you look at the pub crawl, which is like $20, $25, it's a big shift. We're serving food, which is a big cost, but yeah, we had a partnership with Holland and it worked perfectly for that seafood tour because you're a block away from the ship. So you pick them up, you do a tour and you drop them off. But again, cruises, another industry that might take a while. Yeah,
it's unfortunate. I know that brings a lot of people into Key West too.
Mm-hmm.
So, how about I saw you might have posted it on LinkedIn. So did you guys receive some awards as well, or was that the Bahamas tour? I thought there was one that was that received some sort of TripAdvisor award or a
Bahamas.
Okay.
Yeah, they got they were named like the number 4 experience in the Caribbean.
Oh wow. What's the name of that tour again?
Called True Bahamian Food Tours.
Okay. Can you get to that from the Key West website at all, or is it just totally separate?
No, it's separate. Yeah.
Okay.
It's separate. Although, we should have a link.
Is there plans to kind of, keep duplicating that? Like keep adding tours in other cities, under yourself?
No. So after I opened up the Key West food tours, me and my mother, basically my mom, opened up Havana, food tours of Havana in Cuba. And then I became the CEO of Tribahamian. And it's like, no, I don't have
That's
any.
enough.
It's enough. No more plans for expansion. It's just like, I'm fine now in my bubble. Obviously things are totally different. Last
Sure.
year, it's just like working 7 days a week, especially because the seasons of, you know, Nassau, Havana, and Key West are all the same. It's
Yeah.
that, you know,
Yeah, it's a grind, I'm
November to
sure.
April, right?
Yeah. All right. So no more
No,
expansion there,
no.
but you know, I'm excited. Is there like, is the goal of like, traditional food tours, do
Yeah.
they try to stay at the same spots all the time, or like every 3 years is your goal to rotate it or just create new tours?
Yeah, so I would say the goal is to not deviate, at least in my opinion, to not deviate too far from your core product, because when it comes to operations, it's just obviously a lot cleaner in operating to do the same, scale out the same product, right? So especially because you have a repertoire and a relationship with the restaurants, and you walk in at the same time, you know, the staff knows exactly what you're there for, everything is ready, plated, and your group is gone within 15 minutes. So the more you start doing these like boutique experiences where you're kind of going to all these other places, it just kind of loses the relationship of the experience, where the staff doesn't recognize you, doesn't know who you are. It takes a while to build that relationship. But I would say it's mainly because of operations. So at one point last year with Key West food tours, you know, we were doing even not last year, even this year, January, February, March, before the shutdown, we were doing 7-8 tours a day. And that's the same tour going in, you know, 11 a.m., 11:30, 12 p.m., 12:30. And so if you were to have different restaurants on those tours, it starts getting really messy trying to operate the day.
That's great. What's the biggest surprise that you kind of encountered, once you started the business? I know like that maybe you didn't have in your mind going into it.
I don't know, because I'm very type A and I'm very analytical. So I feel like
You were
nothing,
pretty
like I
well
was so
prepared.
prepared before by going to this class and then joining this like network of food tour, going to these conferences, like just absorbing information. Yeah, I can't really say. I think maybe the surprise for me too was I was so hung up on that, like I want you to come to Key West and be taken around by a local, and I would never go to the Hemingway House or Sloppy Joe's. Like those are tourist attractions. Like I want you to come and see the real Key West. But then when I moved into the corporate shift, and I was like, well, of course these people want to go to those places if they have limited time while they're on the island. So I guess I surprised myself that I like went a little bit more mainstream in the way. But what I still find comfort in is that like I'm showing you the mainstream of Hemingway and Sloppy Joe's, but through the Key West Food Tours brand, which is
Yeah.
still pulling in a local experience, and you're still going to be able to eat and drink this food, and I'm going to tell you the history about it, you know, so you're still getting my branded experience. And so yeah, I was like, if you would have told me that like 4 years ago,
Never.
yeah,
Never gonna do that.
no, I'm like, when someone first approached me about it too, the corporate the sales, and they're like, yeah, well, they really want to go to Hemingway House and Sloppy Joe's, and I'm like, okay, well, that's not what we do. Like we take people off the beaten path.
Yeah.
We go to these little restaurants, and like they can go by themselves. They don't need me to take them there.
Yeah.
But like, no, wait, they do need me to take them there.
Yeah. How about, what was kind of the biggest obstacle that you've had to overcome? Just, over the
COVID.
last COVID?
Yeah, that's just
Yeah.
like hands down the craziest. wildest experience is COVID. You know, when I first started, well, I first had the food tour concept. I'm like, okay, I'm going with this. And there was like this one place in Bahama Village, this guy that made conch salad. So Bahama Village is where Blue Heaven is, where you have the key lime pie.
Yep.
So Caddy Corner is just like really mom and pop place. The guy is like, you know, 4th, 5th generation local. He makes conch salad. Sometimes he doesn't advertise it. Like you just got to know to go and ask him to make it. That's the kind of place it is. And I was like, this is what I want on my tour, you know? So he was the very first person I asked to be on my tour. I wrote up like a 3-page essay, preparing myself, you know, for what I was going to do and how I was going to pitch this. And after my whole, like, you know, probably 20-minute presentation to him, he respectfully said no. And I was like crushed. I was like, oh my gosh, like he told me no. And I'm thinking like, oh no, like this is not.
Nobody's going to do it.
Nobody's going to do this. Yeah. And, you know, the reason he told me no is because it's a mom and pop shop, and him and his wife, there's some days where they're not there. You know, they close or they'll open, and, you know, they don't want to be having to be in a place if our tours are coming in. Right. And long story short, you know, even on our tour, we stop at that corner and we point them out. And we would take the tour. If they were open, I would take the tours in there and be like, you should eat conch salad here. And we had such a great relationship with just, you know, us exposing them. But that first no was very crushing. And thankfully I got over it and I went to the other places. But
how long did that take to get the restaurants lined up?
It took probably like a month, and it really was, because I cherry picked the places. Like I knew exactly where I wanted to go, but it was just, they were kind of just like, okay, like they didn't understand, but they were, and I said, okay, this is what I'm gonna do. And we did like family and friends tours, and it was basically just like me and a group of friends or family. And I did that a couple times so I could show them, you know, in real time what it was like. But yeah, it was just very interesting. And even now, even some of my restaurants that I work with, because we cherry pick and we want restaurants that don't need us, I would say too. Like there's some restaurants that are doing fine without our tours, but they're so good that we want them on our tour. Even now I'm still having to explain sometimes the concept to them, because they are like, they understand in theory what's happening. Right. They're just like still like not 100% on board. And I think that has to do with Key West, that we're like a tourist mecca. So even our slow season in September is never really slow. Like these restaurants never have issues with bringing guests in. Like it's, you know, in other places I would see that the restaurant's like probably slow at lunchtime and they want people to come in there, and Key West is like always busy all the time.
Yeah. No, well, it's great. Well, thank you for, you know, launching that business. I enjoy it. I'll definitely be back again. I was telling the guests on the tour Sunday, I was like, we do this every time, because they were asking like, does anybody ever come back like and do it again? Right.
Yeah, we do.
Like, we do all the time.
But we also get other guests that come and do the same tour.
Yeah.
This is fun.
Yeah. Good food, just good walk, something to do in the afternoon.
Yeah.
So what's the website again?
KeyWestFoodTours.com.
Pretty simple. Pretty simple. No, I want to thank you for joining me. It was good chatting with you, especially after, you know, being a customer the last few years. So
thank you so much.
Thank you for joining me.
Yeah, it was fun. I always love having fun conversations about the journey, even though I do feel that I think I would say, you know, a lot of businesses, there's a lot of luck involved. I was at the right place at the right time as far as the food tour goes, because there wasn't one happening at the time when I started, and they were all over the country at that point. And I was like, that's why, I went to Chicago. I was like, I needed to learn this as soon as possible. So I do think there's luck involved with any business. But it's also, for me, it's like 50% luck, but 50% of the hustle. And I feel like
hustle's important.
days a week. Yep.
Is there competition now, or has there popped up and gone away?
There is. It's actually a corporate food tour, which is a global company, and so they have tours all over the world. And so yeah, I mean, they kind of stopped from like COVID, kind of I think shut down the entire operation globally. So I don't really know what's going on with them. I think they resumed here a couple weeks ago, but I
haven't been on that one, but I could tell you they're not as good as this one. So.
At first I was like so deathly afraid of competition. That was the reason why I took that class in Chicago, because I was like, I got to be first, I got to be now, I got to do this now. But now going, years through this company, because we're still having to explain the concept of a food tour, it's like, if there are more food tours in Key West, there's room for everybody for the piece of the pie, because look how many sunset cruise boats there are that you like to come on, right? Yeah. And now I'm sure you're loyal to one company, but there's a lot of sunset tours, and they do all well because there's that many people coming to Key West. So, Key West food tours, if more and more people start learning about food tours, there's no way that we would be able to host everybody that came to Key West. So,
and competition, can help push you and keep you hustling, as well, keep you on your toes. So, but you guys do a phenomenal job. Your people have always been great, and that's every single one that we've had. So I think that's important too, is, that aspect of it, because if you don't have a good tour person, that could ruin the experience.
Yep.
And so keep up the good work. I will come back and see you again soon, because I want to be back down there. I'm trying to convince my wife. I'm like, let's move to the Keys somewhere. And she's not having it yet. So.
Well, next time you come, you can come on the cocktail tour. Have a good time.
Yeah, that's what we'll do. No, well, thanks again. And we'll talk to you soon.
All right. Thank you.